I introduced the last one, I think. Didn't I?
Well, what if I don't want to introduce this one? Welcome, everybody, to the season finale of Dropped. We made it. We didn't collapse. The podcast is still going. Matt and I still like each other. And we've made it to episode 10, which is amazing. We wanted to wrap up the season with a little recap and just to see how far Matt and I have come, individually and as a couple. We wanted to listen to some messages and hear from you guys. And, well, some good news to end our season with. Matt and I have had a couple of discoveries of our own because we decided to read the small print of our contracts. Stay tuned. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 10 of our little podcast, Dropped. All right, good morning, Matt. It is early in the morning again for me. Can we next season? Can you work at 3 a.m. so I can work at the afternoon?
Well, good afternoon, Greg. No, unfortunately not.
I always just look tired. I sound tired and I look tired.
We could do later in the day. It's just you have a whole a family to attend to. So,
I do.
This is your. Remember, don't ever forget that you're the guy who says, "Can we do 7:30 a.m. my time?" And I go,
That is true. That is true. Moving on. How was your Christmas?
It's been good. Yep. Family and too many wine. And yeah, it's just been, it's as it is, Christmas presents, things like that. Tiring, I think. Good, but the answer is good, but tiring.
Okay, good.
How was yours?
It was very chill. I didn't do anything. I just stayed at home with my wife and my child, and we just did nothing.
Nice.
It was very relaxing.
That sounds appealing, actually.
I find that Christmas kind of has that New Year's Eve thing where you're told it's supposed to be the best night of your life or the best day of your life, and it's just another fucking day.
Yeah.
It was just another day on this spinning rock that we're all on.
My wife Sula is finishing a book that she has to hand into her publisher, her first book. And
That's incredible.
Yeah, she's finishing up the first draft, and we were just like, we can't spend all that time on Christmas because her deadline is in a few weeks.
Right.
So we're going to have to we'll have to stay home this Christmas, and if people want to come see us, they can come see us. And it's just extended Christmas by like 5 times as long.
Yeah.
It's like the biggest. It was been fun, but also it's meant that the Christmas started the weekend before Christmas with her dad, and then it followed with her mum, and then it followed with my family over multiple days, and it's just it wasn't the shortcut that we thought it would be, but It was fun. Okay, so we're at episode 10 of season 1 of our tiny titchy tiny teeny weeny little podcast, and yeah, that feels strange to say actually that we're at the season finale of season 1. We've come a long way. I think we've both come a long way, and we almost got into a conversation about how far we've come before we pressed record on this podcast. And we were like, no, let's have this conversation on the podcast. So we're going to recap a little bit, both recap over the episodes that we've done and our revelations from season 1, but also mentally about how have our perspectives shifted? How have they shifted over the course of this podcast, and are we feeling more hopeful, less hopeful? We thought that'd be interesting to do with you, the listeners. So, Greg, how far you've come, little Greg. You've blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Yeah, how are you? Think back to Greg in July of 2024. You had an album that you hadn't finished, but that you were finishing up. And I remember we were having a bunch of conversations about like how you might release it or not release it on various platforms, and how we were going to tackle social media and just the thing that inspired the podcast being like, how do you even do it? How do you even do it effectively in 2024? And I if you don't mind me saying, I would say that you felt a little bit hopeless about that at that time, and you've made that known on the podcast at times. But I feel like I've sensed you getting a little bit more hopeful over the podcast. Am I right in saying that? How do you feel now versus then?
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate, I think. You said something in the early before we started recording, but it's like we've learned so much that I feel more aware than ever, which comes with it hope and despair. But I will say I do feel in general more hopeful. I feel more accomplished. I feel wiser. I feel like I've learned so much on this podcast from either you or our guests that it's hard for me not to implement some of that knowledge that I've learned. And so that's been really helpful and empowering. I think it's very easy for me as an individual to stew in my own feelings and my own opinions without actually looking at the reality of the situation. And so I can sort of get very in my head about something that might not even be true. So in that regard, it's been good to lift the lid off a few of the things that I didn't understand and learn instead of just complaining about them. So yeah, I do. I mean, we can get into more of the details, but in general, I feel more empowered and more hopeful than I have in a long time because of what I've learned on this podcast, which is cool. I mean, that was the goal going into this, wasn't it, really, to learn? And
yeah,
it's happened and continues to.
Yeah. I think it's just important to know what the landscape is and understand it, and rather than just be like, this is messed up, this shouldn't be the way that it is. It's like, yeah, that is messed up and it shouldn't be the way that it is. But what does that mean for us, and how can we address that in a way that isn't just complaining and just like complaining but aimlessly? Like if you can complain, like you can start a revolution, you can complain in a way that is effective once you work out what you actually want to change.
Yeah.
That's way more effective than just being angry on social media every now and again, which we've both been guilty of in the past.
It doesn't help. And what they say about insanity, right? You do the same thing over and over again, but expect different results. That's kind of how I was feeling. Just kept banging my head against a brick wall. But because of the things that we've talked about, I just look at it differently now. I ask you a lot because you're so wise. So I get a lot of the answers from you. But I do look back to some of the guests that we've had on, or at least some of the topics that I've been forced to look at and approach them differently. I think I have a bit more of a business head on my shoulders than I did 6 months ago. Or I see more opportunities than I did before. I think I was I'm an artist, I'm going to make albums, and if that doesn't work, then everyone can fuck off. And it's just, that's not how this works. And when things change, you have to adapt. If you don't adapt, you just fall by the wayside.
It's also like I don't know, I feel like I've seen you come back to who you are as like an artist over the course of this season, because you're so good at so many things, that like better than me at a bunch of things, like self-production.
Well, of course.
Self-production, video production, all of, like, look how good your video looks right now, it's like you look like a #1 YouTuber. But all these things like that you have in your favor, I feel like it's good to see you using them a lot more. And also, you were when I was busking, you were making successful YouTube videos, and you were breaking through that noise in your own way, and you were coming up on my Facebook feed when we didn't even know each other. Like I told you when we met, like I know who you are because I've seen you come up multiple times recording flat videos in your flat in New York at your piano and your guitar and all of that kind of stuff. So like you can get to a point in your career where you feel like you don't know which buttons to press anymore, or you don't know how to do A in order to get to B. So it's good to make sense of it again in a way, and also to realize like I think the difference now is there's so many options of what to do. Yeah. And you feel like we both got lost for a minute in feeling like we had to be everywhere and do all of them. So you end up going, okay, I'll be everywhere and do all of them. And then you try and do it and you're like, this feels awful. I don't want to do any of them. Yeah. Whereas I think now we're more comfortable in like, okay, well maybe we're not shooting to be Coldplay right now, but we're shooting to just work on this level we are at right now and connect with the fans that we have at this level in order to get to another level and maybe build, and we'll see where it takes us. Whereas we come from an industry where we were brought up to try and be Oasis and Coldplay. Yeah. And when that didn't happen, it's like, okay, well, you failed. What are you doing now? And there's a whole other career out there. And if you embrace that, then it doesn't feel like you're losing. It feels like it can start to feel like you're gaining ground again. 'Cause you are.
Yeah. And that was a good lesson from the Rob Abelow episode. Rob really sort of spelled that out for us. And you can have career and success in much smaller little pockets. And like Matt just said, it definitely feels sometimes like we started doing this to be rock stars and worldwide artists, worldwide known household names, that kind of thing. You don't need to do that. And one thing about moving to Portland has taught me that there are these little micro communities all over the world of really talented people, and you don't have to try and take over everything. I think social media makes us think also like we have to reach the entire fucking world, and it's just not true, and it's not necessary, and it's barely possible. If that's your goal, is to get the entire world to look at you. I mean, Jesus Christ, talk about impossible goals.
Well, if you've got bottomless pockets like labels have, they do select a few artists. We've learned recently that they'll select a few artists and they'll put a few $1 million behind their social media campaign. Paying influencers to talk about them, paying for boosted posts, for ads. And you're like, who is this new artist, and how I've never heard of them before this, but now they're everywhere and everybody's talking about them at once. How can I organically get there? And it's like, you generally can't really. Like there is maybe one a year where organically they get somewhere where they have no right to be, on the economic scale of it, based on what they put in versus what they get out. But most of it is bought and paid for. So if we're trying to compete on that level, we'll never win. We'll never win. If you release your song and you put $100 behind boosting it, and then there's a label putting $3 million, there's no way that you're going to get through. So we have to resonate where we can resonate for now, and then gradually grow and build from there, I think.
And it's been really nice to not be alone in this, to have Matt alongside me during this last few months. It's been really nice because I think being a solo artist can be very lonely sometimes, especially when you're recording everything yourself and doing all your own things. You really find that you don't hang out with anyone. And it's been really nice to Matt and I talk every single day. You're the only person in my life that apart from my wife, that I talk to every day. And that's been really nice because sometimes when I feel that despair or I feel that darkness kicking in, I'm like, Matt, help. And Matt's really good at seeing the positives in things. We can both go dark when we want to, but Matt's really good at seeing the light, much better than I am.
Just on that last point, that has been really, really nice. And I think you're really good at giving credit to me for that. But it's the same. I've been reaching out to you when I've needed advice and sending you things and to listen to. And it's just for the listener, the takeaway being that I think we're sometimes conditioned and trained to think that it's us or the next person. That and there's only so many spaces. And it's oh, what, you're a male singer-songwriter who writes melancholic, folk-esque acoustic music. Well, there's only room for you or Greg,
Yeah.
And that's such a silly way to think of things. It's the second you retrain yourself to be no, that's you can, if you have help and you create we used to have scenes, right? We used to have music scenes, and people would share knowledge in music scenes and look at which guitar you're playing, and look at that guitar, look at that song that girl just wrote. It's incredible. Maybe I could write one like that. And look at that guitar that guy's playing, and look at the way that they're doing it. And we'd learn live and then discuss things between shows and get on the same bill together and help each other out. And we've both benefited from that a lot in our career with other artists. We know that some who've gone on to do even bigger things than we've done so far and asked us to support. You had it with Andrew McMahon at the earlier on in the year. Was that right?
Yeah.
So there's so much benefit to that, but I think the internet divides us into individuals. A massive revelation for me over the last couple of years through this podcast and over the last couple of years of being an indie artist is just embrace the other people that you believe in around you and rise together. I think that was something that hip hop got right, in the 80s and 90s, one hip hop artist would blow up and their other members of their crew would suddenly pop up because they're featured on a record, and talented people would rise together. And I think if you can create scenes like that, which maybe this is the beginning of the Dropped scene, then you can rise much quicker. It just makes it easier, and it also just makes you way less likely to quit.
Yeah, because community lifts you up. I mean, shit, since we started this podcast, I go to open mic nights in Portland now. I just go. I don't go and announce myself like I'm some fucking big deal. I just go and I play a song and I listen to other people and I drink hot toddies. I just talk to people about music and shit. I don't remember the last time. I did not do that in Los Angeles, and I haven't done that since I moved to Portland. But this podcast has just put me in a different headspace where I'm like, it's not all about me.
Yeah,
it's just not all about me. It's not
even all about success.
It's so
like I
easy.
framed that
Totally
a second ago of like, yeah, you're more likely to get successful if you. And it's like that's one thing if you want to think of it that way, but it's not all about that. It's about you're more likely to just enjoy your life as an artist if you participate in a community and help other people. It's rewarding to like see a musician who isn't quite where you are at yet, but has the potential, and just give them a few pointers every now and again, or just go over to them and go, "You're really good, by the way. I don't know if you realize it, but like that third song you played is amazing." And that's just my opinion as a like, not, hey, I'm Greg Holden and I did this.
Exactly.
And I think,
I mean, I do carry my home plaque everywhere I go.
Yeah.
You know, I just carry it just walk into every venue with that in my arms. Oh shit! I think about the thing that happened to you in Sicily when you were living there over the summer. How you went into that bar and there was a piano. And you ended up performing for the whole bar. I think about that all the time because
really,
it reminds me that just because we might do this for a living, or I'll speak for myself, can be jaded sometimes and have. I like the last thing I want is to be in a bar and someone starts singing. That's because I have a bad attitude, right? That's because I'm jaded from music. And you telling me that, it made me rethink, like, when I see someone singing or when I see someone performing, I'm like, that's great. They feel free right now. They're just performing and they're singing whatever they want to sing. And the cool thing about this open mic night is there's no covers. You're not allowed to sing covers, and so everyone's singing their own songs, and it's like very humbling and very heartwarming, and it just brings me back to why I love music. This open mic, I keep talking about it, but it reminds me of my old New York scene where everyone there is basically waiting to play. I don't know how many people show up to this thing just to watch. I mean, I know there are a few, but I think mostly it's a room full of people who are waiting to play. But that's cool too, because it means they're all just there supporting each other, because everyone sings along to everybody's shit. It's a community. And I remember the first time I went in there, I got invited by my friend who runs it. His name's Jacob Westfall, and he invited me to be a featured guest on it, so I get to sing like more songs than everybody else. They highlight me in the middle, and I had a bad attitude about it. I remember walking in, I wasn't in the happiest place that day, and I walked in and was like, "Am I really doing an open mic night? Is that really where I'm at with my career?" You know, and I felt like such a dick afterwards, because actually it was so fun that I wanted to go back and do it again, and I do. It reminded me of why I like music, and the room was so warm spirit. There was such a warm spirit in there, and I felt like such a prick afterwards. Yeah, I got a mirror shined on myself. It pointed at myself, and I was just like, Greg, get over yourself. Just go fucking sing. Just enjoy it, you know. And it was such a huge moment for me in the end, because
I'm agreeing, because I've been there.
Yeah, I mean, you used to host an open mic night.
Yeah, I used to host an open mic night, and that was great. But I mean, what I'm saying is basically when I got like a little bit of a successful song or two, I totally had this like fear that I think it's just like it's another form of imposter syndrome, because it's like I've reached this level, and if I dip down to what the industry sees as a lower level, and I'm seen playing something that isn't at this like the highest level that I can possibly reach right now, then I'll stop climbing. Yeah, it's like as though it's like snakes and ladders or whatever. If I dip 100%. Down that many steps, then they'll be like, oh, we thought you were the guy who opens festivals, but actually you're the guy who plays in a bar in a pub in London to three men and his dog. Okay, right, we'll forget about you for the festival. As if anybody is watching. It's like wild, but it's such imposter syndrome.
And it plagues
that
you throughout your career too.
It really does, and it like steals good experiences. And I really love our shift in perspective over this podcast because, I mean, really, on the grand scale of things, who the fuck are we, really? You know?
Yeah.
But I mean, to our
Who the fuck
friends
is
and to
anyone?
each other, like,
Yeah.
exactly. We are like, to our, like, the people who care about us, and the people who resonate with our music resonate with our music. But who is, exactly as you say, who is anyone really on the scale of, the scale of the world? So just, yeah, I love that shift in attitude is all I'm saying. And
Yeah.
I love that for me. I love that for you.
Speaking of shifts in attitude, you've always been a sort of positive light since we started this. Although you have your problems with the industry, you always have been a positive spin on what is usually a negative topic. How do you feel like you've changed this year? I want to know how you feel about your progress since we started this.
Yeah, there's been a real like shedding of like the last fragments of my ego, I think. I don't think there's many of them left now. Well, there's always another one to discover. So that's been, I mean, at times it's been uncomfortable, but also I think it's been a good thing to truly get to like where I'm at and be like, okay, this is where I'm at, and now that I know where I'm at, I know I can know where I want to be, rather than cling on to, but I had over 1 million monthly listeners, and I had this many things, and I did this thing, and I did that thing, and whatever. And I was on radio and blah, like all the things I was. See, there's a little fragment of my. I stuck an extra one in there for my ego there. And also, I did this. I don't know if you're listening. It's still there.
It'll always be there. It has to be. As long as you're aware of it.
Yeah, but I think to like finally shed a lot of that, and just like what we were talking about now, and just exist as an artist and musician. So that's a big thing. But also, like, well, beginning of the year. So I was very hopeful at the beginning of the year. It was this time last year, I was about to release the debut album as an album. It was produced by my like dream producer. Was so happy with how it was sounding. Was getting good momentum on the singles leading up to it. And I was like, okay, finally, like 2024 is like the big comeback year. Mm-hmm. Had this crazy upward trend lead into 2020 through to 2022, got dropped in 2022, had to like pick up the pieces, started releasing the singles in 2023. 2024, we released the album, and boom, we're back. It's undeniable. There's going to be reviews, it's going to be played on some radio stations, it'll be synced in some films and TV and all. Like that was, you know, the moment before you do the thing where anything's possible and you start to go, the best thing would be this. Mm-hmm. So I'll definitely at least get this, because like it would be amazing to get it if it got 100 million streams, but like, okay, I'll be happy if it gets 50 million, you know, that kind of thing, where you're like, your imagination gets a little bit carried away. Released the album and it's done fine. It's like 1 million streams, you know, it's done okay. Hasn't paid for itself. We've talked about all these things, and creatively I'm fulfilled by it, but financially and as a business asset, that is the injection of investment that I need to do the next thing. It hasn't become that. It hasn't paid for itself. And I was thinking, well, if that'll be the thing that gives me the next injection, cash injection, to make the next album and whatever. Released the album in January, did the show. My guitarist who had been in the band with me for years decided to go off and do other things. He left the band, and so that was a big shift. And then that's became this thing where I've been on this trajectory from solo artist to band to back to solo artist. So 2020, what I'm trying to say is 2024 has, through one lens, was like a disappointment, really. If to me last year, I didn't fulfill, it didn't turn into what I thought it would be. But me now, I don't feel like it's a disappointment, because I feel like there's been a ton of growth. I feel like I'm set up to do the next thing. I feel like I've truly valued myself and like my ability more than I did before.
That's
so
good.
Like what I was after before was external validation to go, here's another 50 million streams
Yeah.
to just to convince you that you're still worth something. Whereas now I'm like, no, like whether I get a million streams, 1 stream, 10 streams, I'm more, I don't know, I feel like I'm closer to myself at the beginning of my successful run than I was at the end of 2023.
Well, this season we've also lifted the curtain off what those numbers actually mean, and
Yeah,
how
exactly.
malleable they are, and how they don't necessarily represent who you are as an artist anyway. So it makes sense that you would start to feel more fulfilled the more that we learn about that stuff.
Totally. And just with starting Patreon and connecting with some of the people who connect most with my music, that's just been the more like a really fulfilling thing. And whether, I mean, if the fans who have done an outpouring of love for the music but haven't joined Patreon as well, like all those fans, whether they're on that or not, have just given me a lot and made me think, well, I'm definitely connected with people. And and when someone messages me about a really hard time they've gone through and how a song is helping them through it, then that is genuinely like it sounds like platitude sometimes, but it means more than a lot of streams.
Yeah.
It's just, we just have these warring sides of like, okay, creatively fulfilled, tick, financially fulfilled. No, it's a financial disaster right now in this music industry. And we're trying to like find ways to do that all, because we always just want to tick that and forget about it. Like the financial side, I want to just be able to give it a tick, stop worrying about it so I can fully concentrate on the creative side.
Yeah.
But when that isn't a tick, it's like that starts to like grow and dominate everything.
Yeah.
Long answer, but I guess that's how I'm feeling.
Right. Well, we've talked about how we're both feeling and what we've learned. And now I want to talk about implementation. How do you think you've implemented what you've learned from our podcast into your career?
Well, that shift in really kind of valuing the fans that I do have and focusing on them first rather than constantly focusing on growing a number. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a weird, like twisted state of mind you get into as an artist. I don't know if anyone listening will recognize this, or yourself, Greg, but you can get like social media platforms and streaming platforms, because they're so metrics based, can get you in this state of mind where it's like the number goes up, you connect with a fan, and it's like, okay, there's another one collected in the bag. Mm-hmm. Who's next? And you never look at the group of fans you've got.
Yeah.
You look to like, okay, but I need more. And it's not us that necessarily need more. It's the platforms that need more. So
yeah,
we're doing their bidding for them. So that shift in perspective is of like, no, like these are people who like I connect with. Like let me really properly connect with them as human beings and see how we can connect more. So there's that, but also because it made me so uncomfortable, this financial versus creative battle, I've started to look at things outside of my original music that will still, and this is like partly inspired by what we've learned from people like Sasha on the way. Sasha was talking about, you build a collection of things, and they're not all going to pop off at the same time, but they will feed each other. And he was talking about how he used to run some live music nights, and then he's got a studio and publishing
company, yeah,
all of that, and how those things collectively feed into each other. I think this year at times I've been like, am I doing too many different things? I'm doing the podcast, I'm releasing music, I'm doing a live music night now, I'm doing like a lot of like audio engineering as well for people, and like little bits of production and things, live sound. But I'm already seeing that like if I do those in the right places and don't just like spread myself too thin, but like cleverly pick what they are, then they are already feeding into each other,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So that's a big shift. It's potentially turning into like 2 new companies that I'm running. But I mean, what is a company right now? Before it's successful, it's a new instrument.
It's another
Instagram
idea,
account,
Yeah, but
so like you can manage that.
I mean, I feel the same way though. I said earlier on that it's changed. I've got more of a business head on me now, and it's mostly because of you. I mean, you are so ambitious in that regard. And a lot of that probably stems from, the financial aspect and just trying to think of, of other ways to do things. And I feel quite privileged in the respect that I've still got some of this money left over from this hit song that I wrote 10 years ago. And I'm sitting in a very, like I say, privileged place currently, right? And I've talked about this too, like that won't last forever. And I do think about my future a lot because I have a family and it's not going to last forever. So that being said, I have, because of you and the conversations that we've had, I've started thinking outside of the box a lot about what's next for me because I've just made this album and I love it and I'm going to put it out. And the likelihood of it recouping how much it cost me to make it, I'm realistic. It's not very likely unless something amazing happens with it, which I hope is true, but I can't bank on that happening based on, the history of my career. I can't bank on my album blowing up. So I'm well aware that I probably won't recoup the cost of that record. So I'm like, what's next? What else could I do? How can I build something? And so I started thinking about how I produce people and how I know how to write good songs and how I'm good with people for the most part. I'm getting worse with people. But if I can bottle it up real quick, I can probably keep using that skill. But I'm thinking about helping people, with their songs and maybe I start a publishing company. Maybe I do a joint venture with a publishing company where I develop artists and I
wow, that'd be great.
Use the skills that I have. I think that's the other thing is a lot of us are looking at different avenues, different places thinking, well, if I learn how to do this thing, then maybe, but you're like, well, some people who are trying to do that have been doing that thing for like 30 years. So
yeah,
like you're not just going to have an idea and then get into it. But my point being, it's time to look at the skills that I have and how I can use them for good. Also making it less about me has been really nice too. Like we talked about briefly earlier. I just like the idea of helping others with their careers when they're a little earlier on in the game than I am now. And so I'm just trying to think about that because I think the open mic night too has helped me sort of look at younger singer-songwriters and see myself in them, my earlier self. And it reminds me of how much ambition I had in the beginning and how jaded and lazy I've become. And less so now because of the podcast.
Maybe you should start using the word became because maybe you became jaded and lazy, if that's the way you want to put it, before we started this journey. But you're different now.
I am different.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I have a lot more. I'm a bit more optimistic. And I also just see a bit more outside of myself. So again, with the shedding of the ego that you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of that been going on for me this year too. And my album, I actually have a few songs about that. There's one song on the album called "Do You Know Who I Think I Am?"
I love that song,
which is all about the shedding of the ego. But anyway, just different ideas, thinking outside the box.
'Cause do you know who I think I am? Seems like nobody understands. When I speak, you should not. The whole world should stop. 'Cause do you know who I think I am?
I love that publisher idea because if I know what you're saying, like I thought about like I'm doing little bits of audio. I did my degree in music production. I worked in a recording studio in Soho in London for a few years and did some media recording work and all of that. So I was like, well, I've got a ton of skills in that, but realistically, it's good to be able to just go out and do that and get like a few £100 here and there, and when you need it, that's great to have. But am I going to be the next Grammy Award-winning recording engineer? Am I passionate enough about being a recording engineer to be that? No. So like that's a stopgap for me. That's like when I look at Matt Glasby. So Matt Glasby is the recording engineer who worked on our album. He's worked with Alt J, he's worked with Coldplay, Ed Sheeran. He's an incredible audio engineer, and he's probably the best I've ever worked with. He's so passionate about it. He's so excited when he's like, oh, have I showed you this thing? Actually, you're playing through that guitar amp, but what if we did this, and what if we reversed the sound wave, and we did this, and we put this mic here, and we reversed the polarity, and like, how good does that sound? And you're like, wow, that sounds fucking amazing. But how did you learn that? He's like we were calling him like, he was like a wizard, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be that guy about being a recording engineer, but I can be that guy about writing a song because I'm that passionate about writing a song, or like producing a song, or performing, and all my little weird pedal things and sounds that I can make on stage or whatever. Like that stuff really gets me excited. So yeah, I think for you, like that idea of like finding talent, like in between doing your own thing, because that's another important point. Sometimes I've thought in the past that if I do this thing, it means I stop doing the thing that I want to do, or I'd stop being an artist. And what a realization I've made in the course of the last 6 months is I'm never gonna, like, an artist is just like, you just are for life, an artist.
And talk about feeding into each other, though. Like, what if you start doing something that feeds into your own solo career, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, if I start working with a younger artist, I might learn from them. You know, I'm not just there to teach them or help them.
Yeah.
I'm there to, I might fucking learn.
You'll know about this because I know you've had your the Greg Holden Buddhist period.
Yes.
But the thing called beginner's mind, where you look at the world through beginner's eyes, you forget everything that you think you know.
Yeah.
You forget everyone who you think you are, you know.
Yeah.
And you just, baby eyes, look at the world again and look at the things that you love. So beginner's mind has been a big thing for me. I'm reading a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind at the moment. That has been a big change for me this year. And it's been linked to all the things I've talked about before, the shedding of that ego. And not that I'm a religious person, but, you know, I believe we can learn things from all these different
Stop
teachings.
trying to indoctrinate us, Matt. Jesus.
So a few days ago, very last minute, we put out a call on social media to see if anyone had any suggestions. Looking ahead to season 2 as we wrap up season 1. We want to kind of get to season 2 quickly. We've got some amazing, mind-blowing guests lined up, but we also want to take a step back in our little break in between seasons and think about like what we're doing, what we did well this season, what we want to change, and like how we want to develop this. So we got a bunch of DMs about like suggesting the challenges again, adding to that pile, which is very helpful for season 2. And we got an audio note from a guy called Eric John Kaiser. Yeah, let's hear it, Greg.
It's Eric John Kaiser. I'm a French-American singer-songwriter living in Portland, Oregon, originally from Paris. Thanks so much for your podcast and for all your perspective. It's been great to listen to. And you were asking in your last Instagram post about suggestions. I was wondering if you could talk about mental health among certain singer-songwriters, and if you had maybe people that specialized in that kind of topic to help for the up and downs of the roller coaster of being a songwriter. Just an idea. Anyway, keep up the good work. It's awesome. Appreciated. And happy to listen to the next season. Excited to discover the whole next season. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Eric, for that message. Mental health. That is a big one.
That's a whole episode, I think.
That's a whole episode. And Matt and I got into it right before this. We started recording this episode. We had a therapy session together for about an hour. Mental health's a huge one. And personally, I've had about 4 years of crippling depression. So I could talk about mental health all day long, and I won't, but it is a huge part of this battle, because especially I find that if you're an artist and your name is attached to your project, you take everything so fucking personally. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's ticket sales. That's enough to send me to my early grave, you know, because my name is just attached to this number that is dependent on what else is going on that night in a particular city. You know, like, I mean, that's not the best example, but going to what Eric asked is, how do you get through the ups and downs? Well, you listen to Dropped. You listen to Matt and Greg soothe you into a smooth and happy place.
With our calm and smooth, and did I say smooth? Soothing voices.
Close your eyes. Think of nothing but the ocean.
Well, I'm married to a psychologist, so I think about mental health a lot. Maybe she could be a guest. She could come on, She could come on and help us talk about the mental health side of.
That's a really great idea, actually. Why wouldn't we do that
next season? That's a good idea. But let's park it a little bit. Great suggestion, but just too big to address in any real detail right now, but just know that we deal with it.
We all
Ups
deal
and
with it.
downs.
Yeah.
It's really tough. You're not alone if you're questioning your entire existence in music right now. As we've covered in this series, it's a strange landscape.
I don't know. Eric, to answer your question though, before we get a highly trained psychologist on the show, find community, buddy. Find community, especially in the music scene. I mean, I've found to be going out into Portland and finding musicians and finding music lovers has helped me so much. Because when I moved here, I live in the woods. I feel like I'm disconnected from any scene that I used to be a part of. I lived in New York. I lived in Los Angeles. Huge music scenes, huge music business, huge amount of songwriters and people like me. And it was so easy to surround myself with people like myself. Since moving to Portland, I've felt very alone. And I've felt, I love my neighbors. They're all so wonderful, but none of them do what I do. Not even remotely close to what I do. And so it's hard to relate to a lot of them and probably for them to relate to me. And so it's been hard for me to find a community like I had in Los Angeles, which has led to depression. It's led to loneliness. It's led to a lot of tough feelings. So going out and finding what I used to love about being in LA and New York, it's out there. It's out there in Portland. I can tell you exactly the address of where I go. That has helped me tremendously. So anyway, that
could be the first in-person dropped meetup. Greg and Eric.
Yeah. It's totally. Well, he is coming to my Let me do a shameless plug. He's coming to my residency. He said he was anyway. So January 16th, I'm starting my album release residency at the White Eagle Saloon in Portland. Going for 4 months, and I'm doing one in Los Angeles too, starting on February 4th, going for 3 months at the Hotel Cafe. So, shameless plug.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, the reason I'm doing those shows is so that I can actually reinsert myself back into the music industry and the things that I love about music, which is playing live. So my answer is go find community, buddy.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that sentiment.
So easy to get lost online, isn't it? So easy to just get lost on what people are pretending to be online and not. Yeah,
like go out and find people, real people, and perform and go and do your thing out in the world and remind yourself that online isn't the world.
Yeah.
It isn't even the real world, really.
It's not. It gets less and less real every day, I've noticed. It just becomes more and more monotonous and more fake. And
I read it. We'll have to do a whole episode on AI next season, maybe. But let us know if you like that idea. But I read an article today where it was talking about how a Meta executive has announced that they'll gradually be adding more and more AI users to the platform. They were saying we're going to add more and more AI users to increase user engagement. But it won't be user engagement. It'll
just be a bunch of robots talking to each other.
Exactly, yeah. and if you find yourself arguing in the comments, you might be arguing with a robot. So
who are these fucking nerds that are just coming up with this shit? Like, are they trying to create like a dystopian nightmare? Like, what are they trying to do?
Yeah.
It's happening everywhere. The AI generated content is everywhere. I was like, whose idea is this? And what do they think it's going to lead to?
I read a prediction that the most overused term of 2025 is going to be AI fatigue.
I'm already
so they're already predicting everyone's
that word. Yeah, we're already over it. I mean,
yeah.
Nobody wants this. Does anybody actually want this except the fucking executives? Does anybody want an AI generated world?
No. But yeah, I got this message that I wanted to share earlier in the season, but I think now's a good time to share it. This is from my friend Emma Miller, who's an incredible artist. Yeah.
Hello, I'm just tuning in to episode 7. I'm like most of the way through. It is striking such a chord and was actually quite heartbreaking hearing about Greg's derailment of his Tom Hanks moment. And then I know your story so well, but like I have anger bubbling up inside of me. And the streaming side and the gigging side, what you were talking about of like connecting on shows. I've been in quite a dark space the past like couple of weeks, and I'm finally like coming out of it this week, thankfully. But so much of it feels linked to probably stuff that I don't think I'm tapped into, but metrics and social media, and just feeling like it's the same day all over again. Like you put stuff out there and nobody connects with it. And I know that is just not the case in person. So yeah, I loved your point. Like I'm very close to like not wanting to do streaming after this next project. So loved the chat, loving the podcast. And maybe the thing that was resonating, I've literally been thinking of this grassroots route of playing village hall shows, and ignoring like stepping away from the streaming side or the social side and being a complete like direct to fan business model. And I get really excited by it, and then I chicken out and I'm like, oh God. But hearing you guys talk about it, I think these kind of movements are so much more powerful when there's a collective of musicians who make noise about it together. So yeah, that was what was hitting home of like, okay, if Greg's like actually going to take that step and just do vinyl, and I subscribe to Tidal, but I still think it's pretty trash for what they pay. Like fractions of a penny on any platform is just sickening. Yeah, anyway, you guys have been giving me some balls to have conviction and maybe follow through on all of these things that we're feeling. So thank you and good job.
Fuck
That's
yeah.
nice, isn't it?
Yeah. That's
Emma's a great artist, like folk, piano, beautiful voice, very Joni Mitchell-esque. So go listen to Emma Miller, everyone.
yeah, we
Thank you,
appreciate
Emma,
that.
for that message.
Yeah. And that we kind of covered that in the community aspect of the depression message. But yeah, thanks, Emma. I appreciate that message. Well, some good news to end our season with. Matt and I have had a couple of discoveries of our own, because we decided to read the small print of our contracts. In the beginning of this season, we both talked about masters and publishing and how we lost a lot of those rights with signing bad deals and all that sort of thing. And one discovery this year was that one discovery in the last few months is actually that I didn't know the kind of record deal that I signed 10 years ago. And I was talking to my lawyer recently about something else, and we discovered that my record deal was actually a licensing deal. And that licensing deal expires in January of 2025, meaning I just got my album back from Warner Brothers Records, my Chase the Sun album with my biggest songs on it. I now own them. I own the masters, which is an amazing discovery because I thought I would never own them again. So turns out, valuable lesson, guys, read the fucking contract that you sign. Know what the hell you're signing. I didn't even know. I could have just carried on thinking that Warner Brothers owned my masters forever, and instead, I own them now. So anyway, I'm skimming over that real fast, but that's the moral. That's the lesson I learned: is know what's in your contract before you start panicking.
Wow. Well, some good news to end the season on. That is, that's crazy. That's like to think you're never getting. I remember us saying over this podcast, and I'll never get that back. You said to Violetta at one point, I will Warner own my masters, and I will never get those back. And
turns out I'm an idiot.
Months later, I suppose it's kind of like maybe getting a little injection of anything is possible again makes you go, oh, wait a second, let me take another look. Is there a way that I can get out of this, get a little bit of fight back? And you've discovered something that is like, that changes everything, right?
And speaking of which, Matt, didn't you do that recently?
Well, yeah. So when you told me that, first I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And then I was like, let me take another look at mine. and I wasn't quite so fortunate. But what I think I've discovered, legal advice pending, is that although I can't own those masters again, I thought I could never re-record those songs ever. And it looks to me like I can't own those recordings again. But literally the same month that you get your masters back, my re-record clause runs out, and I can begin January 2025, and I can begin, if I want, I can begin re-recording those songs that got me where I am today, because they were signed in I think the contract is dated January 2020, and it's a 5-year clause. So January 2025, same month as you.
That's so crazy.
Brackets Taylor's version, brackets Matt's version, if I went in.
I mean,
I'm thinking about how that fits into my next steps.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I knew that, so I don't want to pretend that I'm surprised because you told me recently, but I didn't realize that it was the same month. That's kind of amazing. What a great way to end the season is that we both kind of have these freeing moments that happen right at the same time. Wow. That's remarkable.
I couldn't believe it. I looked and looked and read, and as far as I, as a person, if there's any lawyers listening that would like to just take a look over a page or two of a contract for me, I would appreciate you. But yeah, from my lay person's point of view, I've read the language over and over again. I've even put it through ChatGPT, and it seems to me that I might just be free to own these pieces of art that are just sitting collecting dust in on a hard drive of a record company somewhere for the last few years. I can start to give them a new lease of life potentially, which could be a really interesting addition to my next steps of my career. So,
well, that has to be a focus for season 2. Is what do we do with Matt's newfound freedom, and what do we do with Greg's newfound freedom? How do we exploit those things for good use? For good
use. Yeah.
Chain is broken, and I am free again. It was ripped wide open, and I am free again. Oh, the weight's been lifted, and I am free again.
So, as you know, at the end of every episode, we set each other challenges, and a few weeks ago, a little while ago, we asked you guys to suggest some for us because we were running out of ideas, and you did, and we appreciate that. And one of them I really liked, so I am going to set that challenge for us. Matt, I would like us to cover one of each other's songs before we start season 2. And not only that, I would like us to release them.
Wow. Okay. Can I pick
I
the
just
song?
saw Matt's face.
So I've got to
I
record
don't think I've
and
ever
produce.
seen you make that face before.
So I've got to record and produce and mix and master a Greg Holden song, but in whatever style, like in my vibe.
Yep.
Before season 2.
Yes.
And release.
Yes.
Holy shit, that's going to be a busy January. And I can pick the song.
You can pick whatever song you want. And I have to do the same for you.
I love it. I'm excited and scared
I am
and
too.
overwhelmed all at once.
So I think that the release part was kind of a last minute thing that just popped into my head, but I think that would be a great way to really put pile the pressure on.
So as we're planning season 2 and trying to get season 1 to a bigger audience, because that's what we're going to be doing over the next 4 to 6 weeks, guys. Please help us with that.
Yes.
Help us get word out. We have a whole season for people to listen to now, and I know people love to binge podcasts. So now is a great time, especially if you're around your family and friends over the next few days.
Yeah.
To get the word out about Dropped. Please help us. We could grow so much with your help.
The best thing you can do for us right now is the moment that you finish listening to this podcast is to go leave us a review and give us a 5-star rating and download the episode. That just helps us get pushed a little further up in the whatever.
In the whatevers. Yep.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, just keep in the back of your mind, if you're sitting talking to someone who you think maybe has a journey of, like, I talked to a friend recently who was getting laid off from work, like from their job, which is totally non-music related. And they told me how much listening to this podcast has helped them, because it's just humans going through, like, their things not working out the way that they wanted, and instead of laying down and crying about it, going, no, we're going to find a new way. So it's
awesome.
Motivated my friend to push forward and find and take on the next step. So I'd love it if more people looked at this podcast that way. We can learn a little bit about the background of the music industry and what goes on behind the scenes, but also learn more about just being a human facing adversity.
We're just two humans trying to navigate our way through the world, really.
So everyone's homework: find us 100 listeners and no less each.
Well,
everyone.
We are so grateful to everyone that's tuned in this season. I can't believe we're at the end of the season. I feel so proud of this podcast, and I feel so inspired and so hopeful for our podcast and for my career and for Matt's career. I don't know. I feel so grateful. And what a way to wrap up 2024.
Yeah, same. We're just getting started, and I'm excited for where we go next. And we've talked about a few things, next steps in our career together behind the scenes, but also next steps for this podcast. And we have things that are just kind of baking away, not quite ready to announce yet, but exciting things to return with. So we're just going to keep plowing forward and growing at a sustainable pace. Thank you so much for being our podcast listeners, the people who discovered this podcast this season and give it a chance, took the time out of your lives to listen to it. We're not going to disappear for a long time. We know some of you are relying on us for regular listening now, so we'll be back as soon as we can, within at most a couple of months, but hopefully shorter than that. And we'll see you then. Stay in touch. We're still on social media. We'll be sharing, and you'll see us doing that. And if you need something to listen to, go back to episode 1 and hear just how far we've come. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Happy New Year.